And just before that, there's a paragraph where Mr. Ramusepili puts the particulars of the assault and record. Mr. Ramusepili says, it's a paragraph above 10.6. It says, now the assault accused instructs me that he was slapped, but mainly the torture was a clear plastic bag was placed and covered his face, his eyes, his ears, his nose and mouth, and it was pulled by a person behind, whilst the other police officers held him, and they smothered and suffocated him so that he could not breathe. And then at paragraph 10.6, we ask the rhetorical question that if we make the submission that the answers given by Lieutenant Colonel Mboto demonstrate how improbable the version of accused number one is. It was put to Lieutenant Colonel Mboto that the reason why Brigadier Gininda and them assaulted the accused is because they were telling him to talk and incriminate himself. And the rhetorical question that we were asking is, why would they want him to incriminate himself if Lieutenant Colonel Mboto is already armed with this prepared statement? Then on page 34, maybe at the bottom of page 33, that last paragraph, Colonel Mboto testified that Brigadier Gininda and the other police officers mentioned who allegedly participated in the assault were unknown to him when Brigadier Gininda and the said police officers, or we asked the question as when would they have now had the opportunity to compile the statement as alleged, given the fact that accused one was arrested around lunchtime on the same day. Lieutenant Colonel Mboto responded as follows to that assertion. My Lord, logically, if I'm having this form, I do not understand when did I complete all this information according to him. But to me, I got all this information from him step by step. I think we've already covered that, my Lord.
Yes.
Paragraph 10.7. We make the submission that the implausibility of this version by accused number one is demonstrated in the following answer by Lieutenant Colonel Mboto. And we quote, "They cannot assault a person 3 times and he comes to the office walking." That is not true, my Lord. I want to deny that again, based on those facts. The gentleman was going to come by an ambulance if he was assaulted 3 times, 3 places like that. That is not true. Then paragraph 10.8, we make the submission, my Lord, that Lieutenant Colonel Mboto came across as a seasoned commissioned officer. He gave his evidence in an impressive manner. We submit that his version ought to be accepted. He testified that he saw no injuries on accused number one, and subsequent OB entries at Valeria as per exhibit NN indicate that the accused had no injuries, and the defense also concedes that that fact. He only noted some marks on the hands of the accused caused by the handcuffs. And I see Mr. Ramusipil is making the point that the fact that the entry do not reflect that there were marks on the hands of accused number one indicate that the entries are not reliable.
Are not?
But not reliable.
You see.
But we submit, my lord, that perhaps, it's a question of meaning, the question of language, but what Lieutenant Colonel Mbot is referring to, it's more of imprints caused by the, by the handcuff, just like, a imprint caused by a strap of a watch on one's hands, which it can hardly be classified as anything perhaps of a serious nature.
But did he ever go to the hospital for those wrists swelling and bloodied hands? And remember, there was evidence that the way he was assaulted, there was an outpouring of blood from his mouth, nose, and it poured onto his Fabioni sweater or skipper, and even underneath his white vest.
Yes.
Is there any indication that this was reported to the police?
That was in respect of accused number 2, my
Yes,
lord.
yes.
But there's no such indication, my lord, that that fact was, or that incident was reported to the police. In fact, when accused number 2 was presented with a golden opportunity before Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu, when he asked him about injuries he had none. When, according to him, at that stage he was wearing a vest that was stained in blood. We submit that if indeed he was assaulted and he bled from the nose and his clothes were blood-soaked, he would have taken this opportunity to show to Colonel Rapadu that I've been assaulted and here's proof. What better proof is there than those clothes that he wear that were blood-stained? Obviously, those clothes would have served as exhibit, and the process, as Colonel Rapadu testified, would have been stopped there and there, and he would have then have summoned medical help. But as you mentioned, the accused number 2 did not do that. We therefore submit that it's improbable that he was assaulted as he alleges. Then at paragraph 10.9, we deal with the pointings out. We've already referred to the evidence of Colonel Hadebe, the fact that he asked the accused to take off his clothes both before and after the pointings out, and photos were taken of him whilst he was bare-chested, show that he had no injuries. It was put to him that accused number 1 was coerced to point out a place that he did not know, and Lieutenant Colonel Hadebe responded, he was never coerced by me, and he never reported ever being coerced by anyone. It was put to Colonel Hadebe somewhat vaguely that he was assaulted before being taken to him for the pointings out, but there were no particulars given of such assault. But be that as it may, he testified that he could not see any injuries on accused number 1. Then on page 35, paragraph 10.11, Colonel Hadebe testified that, and we quote, "My Lord, we took him, he took us, he said we must take him to the entrance that is now of Vosloorus. From that area, he said, now I see," and then he directed the driver further. The version of 5 June 2020, according to his version, he does not even know that particular place. The only place he was taken to is where he saw that he was at Vosloorus at the hostel because he was there, he was residing there previously. And he says that is the only place he saw according to his version. Then Colonel Hadebe responded, "That is not correct, my Lord. I did not even know the points that he pointed to me, except being directed by him." Then Mr. Mngomezulu put it to him, "It is further my instruction that he was coerced to point at a place or that particular place that he did not know. He was never there previously." And Lieutenant Colonel Hadebe reiterated his answer that he was never coerced, and he never reported being coerced by anyone else. We've already referred to Exhibit KK, my Lord, extract of the OB and cell register from Alberton, which indicated that the accused had no injuries. At paragraph 10.13, we deal with the confession made by accused number 2 to Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu. And here, my Lord, we point out that the insurmountable obstacle that accused number 1 is facing is this. Initially, it was put to Constable Buthelezi and Sergeant Mohani that the alleged assault took place on the 19th of June 2020. And we have seen, this is confirmed by Mr. Ramusepeli when he set out the grounds on which the accused will challenge the confession. This is the portion that we put on record earlier on when he mentioned that, said no, he was assaulted from 19 June 2020 until he was taken to court. Now, when Mr. Mngomezulu set out the grounds on which the statement to Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu was being challenged, he said the following. On page 36, he says, the accused was forced to make a confession. We've already referred to this point, was forced to make a confession. The court then asked him, he was forced to make a confession. Then Mr. Mngomezulu said, that is correct, my Lord. He was assaulted in the presence of the witness that is coming to testify. We've already covered that, my Lord. And that it was Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu. And he then says, statement was already written when it was brought to him. Mr. Mngomezulu said a statement was already written, so he was forced to sign the statement. So it is my instruction that it was not made freely and voluntarily. But what is important in this regard, my Lord, is what we mentioned. On the same page, the 8th line from the bottom. where Mr. Mgomezulu says it was not in the office. It was at the police station in Diepkloof. So, in other words, he's now contradicting what Mr. Ramusepeli earlier said, that that accused number 1 was forced to sign the statement in an office. But here, Mr. Mgomezulu says it was not in an office. It was at the police station in Diepkloof.
Yeah, because I think it was adumbrated that when he was being so assaulted inside
Yes.
Maboto's office, Maboto came in and the assault stopped
Yes.
inside the office.
Yes.
And that is where this document was signed. That was the initial version, inside the office. Subsequently, of course,
Yes.
it appears it was signed outside Maboto's office.
Yes, indeed, my lord. Then page 37. Mr. Mgomezulu says the first line, not Diepkloof, I confuse it, accused number 1, my lord, I beg your pardon. So the statement was brought into Rapadi's office, Mr. Mgomezulu, that is correct. Or it was just in the police station. Then Mr. Mgomezulu responded, it was in the police station. Then the court asked him where everybody just moves and goes about. And Mr. Mgomezulu responded, moves? Yes. And the court said, is that so? Not in the office. Then Mr. Mgomezulu said, not in the office. So this just buttresses the point that we've made earlier on, that is contradicting directly what Mr. Ramusepeli put to the witnesses. And we further mentioned that this is in direct contrast to the evidence of accused number 2, that the statement was partially signed, but this is a different matter, my lord. We will come to that. This refers to accused number 2. Then paragraph 10.15. The following is a version that was put to Constable Buthelezi regarding the alleged assault on the 19th of June 2020. But accused number 2 made a complete volte-face, alleging that it happened on the 18th of June 2020 and no longer on the 18th of June, after AVL evidence was laid and the locations which he alleged that the assaults took place did not appear on the AVL for the 19th. And we are going to quote extensively regarding those allegations, or regarding that version. Mr. Mgomezulu, okay, let me just put the version of accused 2, because your testimony relating to the incident occurred on the 19th. Is that much limited in terms of the evidence given by the previous witnesses? Then it says, accused number 2 was arrested on 16 June 2020. It was a holiday. Then Mr. Mgomezulu, I will concentrate on the version where you were involved. According to him, accused 2 was in the company of Sergeant Mohola and Mukhani and Sergeant Mabena. They were traveling with a white Toyota Fortuner. Can you remember that? Then Constable Buthelezi, I know the Fortuner, but who was inside the Fortuner, I did not know. Then Mr. Mgomezulu, did you see the Fortuna on the day, Constable Buthelezi, yes. I was clearing the way for it. From where to where? From the N12 to Moroka, from Moroka to Vosloorus. Then Mr. Mgumezulu, N12, does it pass through Alberton or does it, or is it a freeway alongside Alberton? Yeah. Constable Buthelezi, it is outside Alberton. Mr. Mgumezulu, so accused 2 was traveling with Sergeant Mohani and Sergeant Mabena when they stopped next to a garage, a filling station. Constable Buthelezi, I was not there. Then Mr. Mgumezulu, that is where he alleges that is where a call was made. He said, let me put it this way, after a telephonic conversation with somebody, he did not know who he was, suddenly you and Mapumulo appeared. Then Constable Buthelezi answered, well, for starters, there's no garage on the N12. Then Mr. Mgumezulu, I will give description of the place where the garage was or on the way the garage is. If you are driving from N3 from Vosloorus towards Johannesburg, the first off-ramp is Spread View, the second off-ramp is Alberton. There is a bridge, railway bridge. After the railway bridge, there's an engine garage on the left-hand side. According to the description of accused number 2, in terms of that place, it is the area around the garage. Can you say something about that? Then Constable Buthelezi, I will not be able to comment because I did not know what you are talking about. Then Mr. Mgumezulu, on that particular route, there's a board indicating Alberton, the direction towards Alberton. That garage that I'm referring to is along that road. It is on the side. There's where you arrived with Constable Mapumulo. You were traveling in a white bakkie. We'll just keep the rest of the evidence and go to page 39.
Sorry, but just the defense will also have to elaborate on that. As I understood or listened to the evidence, this garage, it's next to the road.
Yes.
According to the evidence I listened to, there's a cafe at that garage.
Yes, indeed, my lord.
There are seats for patrons of the garage who sit around the surface of that garage.
Yes.
There are petrol tanks, and there's an area where people were buying gas tanks. So it means there was a movement of people there.
Yes.
They're buying in the cafe, they're buying the petrol, they're sitting there as patrons of the cafe there.
Yes. And
Some are putting petrol in, although he says they didn't go towards the petrol tanks, but some are putting gas in because he said some people were carrying gas tanks.
yes.
So there was movement there.
And there's also staff. you
Yeah,
know,
of course, the staff of the garage
of
also.
the garage who would have.
And these
witnessed
stupid
this.
police, they commence with the assault in the presence of all this movement
Yes.
of people.
Yes.
The
indeed,
defense
my
has
lord.
got to address me on that because maybe I don't see the possibilities
Yes.
which they see.
Indeed, my lord. Then on page 39, Mr. Mgumezulu, there in the middle of the page, Mr. Mgumezulu, you are referring on the day of the 19th.
Oh, God.
Then, Mr. Buthelezi, I think that is the day that you are discussing. Then he says, let us proceed. You then proceeded, all of you, with all these 3 cars. You proceeded to another place next to a dumping area towards Alberton. So here, my lord, Mr. Mgumezulu draws the attention of Constable Buthelezi that the discussion is about the 19th. And he's trying to verify from Constable Buthelezi as to whether the evidence that he's referring to occurred on the 19th. And Constable Buthelezi says, I think that is the day that you are discussing.
Sorry,
So,
sorry. But that day, Mr. Ngobezulu, didn't he correct it to say, no, actually, my instructions are that the assault in the dumping site was on such and such a date?
I couldn't, not before the availability of the AVL.
Yeah, I know that, because this apparently changed the picture, according to you.
Yes, no, I couldn't find a place where he corrects the date, my lord.
Because I recall Mr. Dupree was pertinently also asked to come with the records of the 18th and the 19th. Is that not so?
Yes, indeed, and he did testify about this, the movement of the vehicle on the
And
18th.
on the 18th, he said the movement, I mean, the car was, it was just standing
Yes, at the garage.
at the garage.
Yes,
There was
from
no
about-
movement
Yes, from about 10 to 7.
up to the following
until
day.
just after midnight
Midnight.
the following day.
Yeah, so, well, you can't have it both ways, I suppose.
Yes.
If the AVL says there was no movement on the 18th, then maybe the car, and I'm not making any conclusions. This is just submissions which I want to understand. Then it means if the AVL says there was no movement of the vehicle into the dumping site, that must correlate with what actually alleged to have happened at the dumping site. Are you with me?
I'm not quite with you on that point, Molo.
Look, if the AVL says there was no movement on the 18th,
Yes.
and then the alleged assault, according to Mr.
Oh, I
Mugwezulu's
see.
instructions,
Yes.
happened on the 18th,
Yes.
then this contradictory evidence, if it is, cancels out mutually destructive of each version.
Yes. Well, as I understand them, when the version now was adapted to the 18th, they said when the vehicle moved to that point where it was stationary, that's when they
Assault.
stopped at the dumping site where where the assault took place. But as you mentioned, my lord, that accused number 2 is what he's simply doing is just trimming his sails according to the wind, and the second version of the incident of the 18th is completely in contrast with what was initially put, that the incident happened on the 19th. And we submit, my lord, that just on the basis of that, his version ought to be rejected. Then on page 40, Mr. Mgomezulu, the fourth line from the top says, so one of the members was in possession of a container which contained water, which was poured. This water was poured in the front body of accused number 2. And it says there was a small device that was to electrocute accused number 2. And further on in the middle of the page, we mentioned that Mr. Mgomezulu says accused 2 was bleeding from the nose. And Brigadier Gininda then appeared on the scene. He came out with documents, and it is further said that there was a gentleman who was wearing braces, and Constable Buthelezi said, I did not meet the Brigadier and Sergeant Mukhola or the other man that was wearing braces on that particular day. That is now the 19th. Then there's a discussion about this gentleman who was wearing braces. Then on page 41, The second line from the top, cross-examination by Mr. Mgumezulu continues. He says, from Alberton, from that area, the accused was transported by Sergeant Mohani and Sergeant Mabena. They passed Chris Hani Hospital. So once again, this clearly demonstrates that he is referring
18th.
to the 19th.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, to the 19th.
Because it's happening contemporaneously with what happened at the
Yes.
dumping site.
Yes. And he then says Colonel Rapadu was inside the hospital and he gave the keys to his wife. Then in the middle of the page, Mr. Mgumezulu, they went to Orlando. They proceeded to Orlando where they parked next to a dumping area. The accused also noticed the ATM machines that were no longer in use. Then in the middle of the page, Mr. Mgumezulu, then he took out some documents. This is after the arrival of Brigadier Gininda with his white BMW. Says he opened the boot and sat on the edge of the boot. Says he then took out some documents and gave them to Colonel Rapadu for accused number 2 to forcefully sign the document. And the same version of the assault on the 19th of June 2020 was put to Sergeant Mohani. Mr. Mgumezulu put the following version, Mr. Mgumezulu, and we quote, accused will come and tell the court that on the 19th, on the date of the alleged confession, he was taken, he was assaulted by the Metro Police officers, including Mabena, who was in your company. So once again, my Lord, this becomes clear that the alleged assault, according to the version, happened on the 19th. Then in the middle of the page, Mr. Mgumezulu, yes, it is my instruction that as he was transported, a car parked next to a certain filling station, he saw a board reflecting Alberton, and then Mr. Mohani, obviously taken aback by all these allegations, he asks, I want an explanation of whether it was when we were still on our way to Moroka. Then Mr. Mgumezulu responds, this is the version of the accused. You cannot pose questions to me. Then on page 42, in the middle of the page, Mr. Mgumezulu, then you immediately after that you actually moved, no, maybe just before that, in the middle of the page, accused was taken out of the motor vehicle, the Toyota Fortuner, and brought to the motor vehicle that was driven by Jonathan. He was seated at the back right side of the motor vehicle of Jonathan, and Sergeant Mabena on the left-hand side. Constable Butelezi was next to the accused, and the accused could not open the door on the right back. And the version then continues in the middle of the page. He says, Mr. Mgumezulu says, from that place, they then went to a dumping area on the way to Alberton. And Mr. Mohani testified that he disputes that because he does not remember them passing a dumping area. And Mr. Mgumezulu says all the cars stop at the area, and he says at this particular area there are stairs, steel stairs with steel poles, and the handcuffs were taken off from the hands of accused number 2. It says he was handcuffed from behind, his one hand was loosened and the other handcuff was put on that on the steel pipe. And in the middle of the page, Mr. Sergeant Mokhane answers as follows. Mr. Mgomezulu, I still ask you to ask him, that is now accused number 2, to tell you the truth, because all of this is not true. The BMW that you are referring to is a new model. It is not a 2020 model. It is the latest BMW. We're not using it, and Brigadier Geninda never came close. Then Mr. Mgomezulu says, when during the course of the assault and torturing, there's a device that was also used. Accused 2 was poured with water from his front part of his body, and he was electrocuted by Mabena, Jonathan, and Buthelezi. And Mr. Mgomezulu says when the plastic was removed, accused was bleeding from his nose. And he put it to Mokhane that he did not participate in the assault. Then in the middle of the page, Sergeant Mokhane answers Mr. Mgomezulu, I do not know how to explain this, but the accused person was not assaulted. He was not taken out because I would not allow it, and he must tell you the truth. He must not tell you lies, because this is now impacting on your dignity. You are a very dignified person. You must not create and say that because we never stopped anywhere. Then Mr. Mgomezulu said, let me then proceed to carry the mandate by giving you the version of accused number 2. Mr. Mgomezulu says that shortly thereafter, accused number 2 was then loosened. That is when they drove to Soweto. Then Sergeant Mokhane says, I'm still refusing, saying that we never stopped anywhere. Said, Mr. Mgomezulu then says, you, Mabena, and accused 2 drove to Chris-Hani Baragwanath, where you met Colonel Rapadu, and he says, I'm disputing that. Then on page 44, Mr. Mgomezulu says, it is my instruction that you drove with Colonel Rapadu to Orlando, and you parked at an open area next to ATM that are no longer functioning. So this is what we submit. It's clear is coupling the assault with the fact that Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu was picked up at Orlando, and that they then proceeded to Orlando at the disused ATMs. And as we correctly, as we pointed out, my lord, that they are now saying that the incident happened on the 18th and no longer on the 19th. But here, my lord, we submit that clearly the assault is coupled with the 19th, and it is further mentioned that they went to Orlando. They parked at an open area next to the ATMs that are no longer functioning, and accused was then taken out of the motor vehicle, and the assault continued. And Brigadier Geninda then arrived with Sergeant Mohola, and Mr. Mgomezulu then says, you gave these documents, there is now Brigadier Gininda, that Brigadier Gininda gave these documents to Colonel Rapadu, and this is when accused was forced to sign those documents. And Mr. Mgomezulu then says there were documents or there were pages that were not stamped with his thumb, and as a result, they were completed at Moroka Police Station. This, my lord, we submit that it is indicative of the fact that the accused changed his version as regards the day of the alleged assault when the AVL were presented. He adapted his version to try and suit the locations where the incidents are alleged to have happened. Then paragraph 10.17 regarding the confession that was made to Ms. Cronje on the 24th of June 2020. We indicate the basis that was laid by Mr. Ramosepeli when challenging the admissibility of the statement. Says the statement had been obtained under duress, that the deponent did not sign the statement. Then Mr. Ramosepeli also mentioned that it was not made freely and voluntarily. At paragraph 10.18 on page 45, we mentioned that the same proposition was put to Constable Lizering by Mr. Mgomezulu. And we quote, if accused number 2 had to tell the court that inside room 2, where the alleged confession was to take place, he did not sign any document, would you disagree with that version? And Mr. Mgomezulu continues, if he says he was taken to Germiston, next an industrial area where the assault continued, and that is when he was ordered to sign the papers, and it is my instruction that you were also present when he was forced to sign the documents. Mr. Lizering, my lord, I can confirm that Mr. Mgomezulu's client is lying to him. He's not telling the truth. He was never taken to Germiston. He was taken straight to Moot, subs from Boksburg. Then paragraph 10.19, we mentioned, we make the submission that strange is the fact that when accused number 2 testified, he considered to signing the confession statement in Ms. Cronje's presence after borrowing a pen from the interpreter, as she had testified, albeit according to accused number 2, he signed to signify that he asked for toiletries. He says he only initialed the statement when assaulted near an open area in Germiston. So once again, this is accused number 2 disputes the version that was put that he did not sign any document there in room 2 in the presence of Mrs. Cronje. Then, my lord, we deal with the summary of the state submissions. And maybe before we get to that, it was put to Brigadier Gininda that he promised a sum of 3 million to accused number 2 to implicate the other persons. It was initially said this happened on the 21st. where he was incarcerated. At Primrose, and this was later changed to say that it happened in Pretoria.
So there were two versions.
Yes,
The
yes,
first bribe was elicited at Primrose.
at Primrose, and then it was then changed to say it was in Pretoria. And this came right during the stage when Brigadier Gininda was testifying. It was never put to any person, and on the 21st, when Brigadier Gininda was said to have elicited the bribe, accused was incarcerated at Primrose and not Pretoria. And Brigadier Gininda mentioned that he doesn't even have the budget for that kind of money, and that at that point, on the 21st, accused number 1 had already made the confession to Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu. And why would he then still make this ridiculous promise, if one can put it that way, to accused number 2? We submit that this wild allegation ought to be rejected. Then at paragraph 11.1, we deal with the summary of the state submissions. We point out, my lord, that in a nutshell, the defense case regarding the statements made by the 2 accused is that the police came with the statements that were already prepared, and they were coerced to sign them by being assaulted. And initially, the allegation of assault was the only ground upon which accused number 1 and 2 challenged the admissibility of the statement. But as we mentioned yesterday, that they are now also saying that their rights were not explained to them. And the submission, my lord, is that if the only ground on which they challenged the assault, the statement was on the basis of assault, if the evidence indicates that there was no such assault, then that would mean that the whole version must fall flat, my lord. And but now that they've brought in this other issue of the rights not being explained to them, we submit that even if that is brought into the equation, the evidence that is before court show that the accused rights were explained to them at every turn. Now, just coming back to the issue of the assault, at paragraph 11.2, for accused number 1, the following particulars of the assaults were put on record. He was assaulted after his arrest on 30 May 2020 at Letabong in Tembisa, at Foslores near the court building, and at Diepkloof. Mr. Ramusipili put it as follows. Now, on the assault, accused number 1 instructs me that he was slapped, but mainly the torture was a clear plastic bag that was placed and covered his face, his eyes, his ears, his nose and mouth, and it was pulled by a person behind, whilst the other police officers held him and they smothered and suffocated him so that he could not breathe. Then regarding the pointings out, Mr. Mgomezulu put the following version to Lieutenant Colonel Hadebe. So you further not dispute the fact that from Vilera to Fort Lores, he was assaulted and back to Alberton, you cannot dispute that. So in other words, they are saying before the pointings out, whilst en route from Valeria, what Mr. Mgomezulu says, Fort Lores, that he was assaulted, and he says back to Alberton, you cannot dispute it. Then in this regard, my lord, we make the following submissions. Number one, there is no iota of evidence that accused number one sustained any injuries as a result of this sustained and severe assault. As Lieutenant Colonel Mboto put it, who, as we've mentioned, is a very seasoned senior police officer, says they cannot assault a person 3 times and then he comes to the office walking. That is not true, my lord. I want to deny that again. Based on those facts, the gentleman was going to come by an ambulance if he was assaulted 3 times, 3 places like that. That is not true. The second point that we want to make is that the extract of the occurrence book of Vilera Police Station Exhibit NN and Alberton Police Station Exhibit KK show that the accused had no injuries. The third submission is that extracts of the occurrence book from Diepkloof Police Station also indicate that accused number 1 had no injuries. Except, as we mentioned, my lord, for the fact that there was this marks on the wrist due to the tight handcuffs, and Colonel Mboto testified that he had to loosen the handcuffs a bit. The fourth submission in this regard, we mentioned that both Lieutenant Colonel Mboto and Lieutenant Colonel Hadebe, very seasoned commissioned officers, saw no injuries on accused number 1. And the fact that we also make the submission, my lord, that Lieutenant Colonel Hadebe made accused number 1 to disrobe from the waist upwards, and photos were also taken, and there were no visible injuries. Paragraph 11.5, insofar as accused number 2 is concerned, he says the assault took the following form, as put by Mr. Mgomezulu on record. Accused will come and tell the court that on the 19th, on the date the alleged confession was taken, he was assaulted by the Metro Police officers, including Mabena, who was in your company. The Metro Police officers, then he said, sorry, who was present was Butelezi, Jonathan, and Mr. Mabena, who were involved in the assault and torturing and tubing of accused number 2. Then he went on, when during the course of the assault and torturing, there's a device that was also used. Accused 2 was poured with water from the front part of his body. He was also electrocuted. He says one of the members had a container which contained water, which was poured. This water was poured in the front body of accused number 2. Then on page 47, we'll go straight to that sentence before paragraph 11.6, Mr. Mgomezulu. Just before that, there's a paragraph in bold that reads, Mr. Mgomezulu, then you had a discussion with Brigadier Gininda. He said, before I put the version, during the course of tubing and assaulting, accused 2 was bleeding from his nose. And then Mr. Mgomezulu, okay, accused 2 after he was beaten, tortured, and choked with a plastic bag. Then paragraph 11.6, when Mr. Mgomezulu set out the grounds on which the statement to Lieutenant Colonel Rapaudu was being challenged, he said the following: Mr. Mgomezulu, it is my instruction that the grounds upon which and the rest of the his submission is inaudible. Then the court asks him, yes, you may proceed. Mr. Mgomezulu, it is that the accused was forced to make a confession. And the court says, you are saying he was forced to make a confession. Then Mr. Mgomezulu replies, that is correct, my lord. He was assaulted in the presence of the witness that is coming to testify. As we mentioned that during the evidence of Colonel Hadebe, it was rectified that the assault stopped when Colonel Rapaudu entered the room. But the fact of the matter is that this is on record. Paragraph 11.7, Mr. Ramosipili set out the grounds for taking the admissibility as follows: that he was arrested on that is now accused number 2, he was arrested on the 16th of June 2020, and he was assaulted from the 19th of June 2020 until he appeared in court. Paragraph, I'm sorry, my lord.
No.
Oh, okay. Paragraph 11.8. It is submitted that there is a major contradiction as to the date of the alleged assault of accused number 2. Mr. Ramosipili said the assaults commenced on the 19th of June 2020, when he set out the grounds on which the admissibility of the statements would be challenged, as demonstrated above. However, the version put by Mr. Mgomezulu to Constable Buthelezi and Sergeant Mukhani was that the alleged assault took place on the 19th of June 2020. And strange is the fact that after the AVL records were obtained and those locations at which the alleged assaults took place did not appear thereon, there was an about turn on the alleged assault, and it was then alleged that the assault took place on the 18th of June 2020 to align the version to the AVL. And we argue, my lord, that this simply shows the untruthfulness of the version of the accused. Then paragraph 11.9, Mr. Ramosipili stated that the assault commenced on the 19th of June 2020, when, according to accused number 2, the assaults commenced on the 16th of June 2020 already, when he was slapped, according to him, for asking Sergeant Mukhani to produce his identification certificate at his room in Pukeng, and he was then told that he's being presumptuous. Paragraph 11.10, it was initially put to Mrs. Cronje that accused number 2 did not sign the confession in her presence, but the accused himself contradicted this proposition in his evidence and testified that he did sign, although he says it was to show that he asked for toiletries. Then paragraph 11.11, Ms. Cronje testified that the statement of accused number 2 was handed to the head of office, Mrs. Dupree, after the parties had left the office. The question that arises is, how would accused number 2 have appended his initials to the statement there near the dumping area where he alleges that he was assaulted, if the statement was in the possession of Mrs. Dupré and not in the possession of the police. Paragraph 11.2. Accused number 2 alleges that the statement would have been blood-stained as a result of the injuries. However, Exhibit JJ, his confession statement had no blood stains on it. Paragraph 11.3, Dr. Tlokwe carried out a dental examination of accused number 2 on the 22nd of June 2020 and could not detect any injuries on him. And incidentally, the accused mentioned that he had a heart condition, which he also mentioned to Mrs. Cronje. And we submit, my lord, that this shows the veracity of their evidence. Paragraph 11.14, extracts of the occurrence books of the police stations where the accused was detained. Exhibit MM of Pretoria North Police Station for accused number 2. Exhibit PP from Phokeng Police Station. Exhibit QQ from Primrose Police Station. And Exhibit SS from Pretoria Moord, the Pretoria Moord Police Station, show no injuries, which the accused himself now concedes in his head. Paragraph 11.15, he testified that his T-shirt and vest had blood stains when he, this is now accused number 2, he testified that his T-shirt and vest had blood stains when he appeared before Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu on the 19th of June 2020. However, strange is the fact that he does not show Colonel Rapadu these blood-stained clothes. This would have been the best exhibit to confirm the assault. And as Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu testified, he would have not continued with the taking down of the confession, but would have referred him for medical examination and advised him to open a charge. Paragraph 11.16, no single docket was opened by any of the accused for the alleged assault. And then paragraph 11.17, both accused alleged that the statements were already prepared when the police forced them to append their signatures on those statements without knowing what the contents of those statements were. The question that arises is, why would the police officers take the risk of presenting statements before court that the accused did not know, that the accused did not know the contents thereof? And we submit, my lord, that this is improbable. And we mentioned that it is also a strange coincidence that the version of both accused is identical on the score. Paragraph 11.18, the white BMW 320i sedan that allegedly appeared on the scene of assault on the 19th of June 2020, wherein Brigadier Gininda, Sergeant Mohola, and a man with braces were said to be traveling in, was not yet acquired in 2020. And we argue, my lord, that this demonstrates the falsity of the version of accused number 2. Then paragraph 11.19, we mentioned that the AVL records support the version of the investigating team about all the places that they visited with accused during the course of their investigation, starting with accused number 1 on the 31st of May 2020, when he took them to Palm Ridge to point out a traditional healer. On the 18th of June 2020, when they visited Carltonville at Sibanye Stillwater to verify the alibi of accused number 2. On the 19th of June 2020, when they took accused number 2 to Moroka Police Station for the taking down of his confession by Lieutenant Colonel Rapadu, and then proceeded to Vosloorus and back to Moroka Police Station, and then to Phokeng and Primrose. The trip to Primrose occurred in the early hours of the 20th of June 2020, and they arrived there at about 4:30 in the morning. 11, paragraph 11.20, we make the submission that the AVL records also accord with all the entries in the occurrence books. In paragraph 11.21, we mention that on his own version, the statement by accused number 2 to Mrs. Cronje was signed before he was assaulted. We therefore submit that it was not prompted by any assault on his own version, as according to him, the assault happened afterwards. Then paragraph 11.22, accused number 2 says Sergeant Mokhane did not assault him and instead intervened when other members assaulted him. So according to him, Sergeant Mokhane was good to him and thus had no reason to fabricate evidence. It is therefore submitted that there is no reason to doubt his evidence when he testified that the accused were not assaulted.
Now, he testifies that Sergeant Mokhane did not give him a piece of the, the Kentucky chicken. They ate it alone.
Well,
A good man, Mokhane.
Yes, obviously Sergeant Mokhane refuted that. And Mala, just to demonstrate that accused number 2 was on good terms with Sergeant Mokhane, he testified that accused 2 told him that he can dance, he can do the dance and lift his foot up to his neck. And accused number 2, when he testified, he said that is his passion, ukugida, you know, as he put it. And another surprising fact was when Sergeant Mokhane was testifying, she constantly referred to accused number 1 by his first name, Muzi. She kept on saying Muzi. We submit, my lord, that shows that there were really cordial relations between the investigating team and the accused. Paragraph 11.23, which is our last submission. As for the admissibility of the occurrence books, we mentioned, my lord, that Exhibit MM was, Exhibit NN was handed by agreement between the state and Mr. Mgomezulu, and we refer to the relevant passage. Accused number 1 informed the magistrate at Tembisa on the 10th of July 2020, as per Exhibit 00, the extract of the occurrence books from Silverton Police Station, that he was assaulted. The note that the magistrate made was that the accused is being assaulted by SAPD Silverton. We've handed in Exhibit NN1, which is the extract of the occurrence book from Silverton Police Station, Exhibit NN2, the cell register from Silverton, and both indicate that there were no injuries. Then just finally on page 50, we, as far as the admissibility of the occurrence books and the cell registers are concerned, we mentioned that they have been authenticated by Sergeant Mukhani and Sergeant Mukhola as they were made in their presence, and they were countersigned, and they countersigned those entries. And I see in their heads, Mr. Ramosipili doesn't really make any issue regarding the occurrence books. We then refer to the case of State versus Mpumlo and others, 1987, volume 2, SA 442, wherein the court held that the church office occurrence books, cell registers, police occurrence books were all held to be official documents in terms of Section 234 of the Criminal Procedure Act. The court held that such documents must be accepted without reservation. And, my Lord, we submitted that was the whole purpose of Section 234, the official document. It could never have been the intention that every time when an official document is, comes up for discussion, that all the people who made entries should come and testify. That will hamstring the service delivery at those police stations. At 451 of the judgment, Judge Mullins held as follows, and we quote, "I'm of course in this judgment not concerned with the truth of the contents of such documents, that is now the church office occurrence books, cell registers, police occurrence books." Says, "In most cases, presumably the contents thereof will be accepted at face value and be common cause. The mere production of such official documents or certified copy thereof is, however, proof of the entry having been made. In other words, the mere production of an official document or certified copy thereof is proof of its authenticity, but not necessarily of the truth of its contents." This aspect has become moot, my Lord, in light of the fact that it's considered on behalf of accused number 2 that in fact, on both accused, that there were no visible injuries.
Has it been considered? I thought
well, maybe
Mr. Mnisi was making submissions, remember?
Maybe.
After the state's defense case was closed, that he wants this court to make a record of the fact that all those entries in the OBs and the contents of the OBs,
yes,
there is no admission by the defense that
yes,
those entries and what is written in those registers or cell books
yes,
pertains to the veracity of
yes,
them being truthful or correct.
yes.
Remember?
Yes, I remember that, my Lord. But what we're saying that the aspect has now become moot in light of what the defense submits in paragraph 6.27 of their heads.
What are they saying?
That the probabilities are that the perpetrators of the assault used techniques that were designed to leave no visible marks. It is not like the perpetrators were involved in any legal action. The police are aware that assault and torture are illegal, and if they engage in such conduct, they would be careful to conceal their crime and leave no visible injuries. In any event, accused 1 did not claim that the assault had left any such marks or injuries. We therefore submit, my Lord, that the defense is here stating that accused one had no injuries as reflected in the occurrence books.
Are they admitting that?
Well,
Because the way I read it,
they are not placing it in dispute, my lord.
no, the way I read it,
Yes.
remember the refrain was, we were never asked.
Yes.
When we came to be booked in by Mabena and Mokgano, Mokgano would be the first one to go through the service sector of the police station and go right up to the cells to go and check whether they were, according to accused number
Yes,
2,
yes.
there were pillows, there were blankets, or there were sponges, and you'd come with a key and take over the duties of the staff of the cell. He would be the one who locks them in, locks him in. The
Yes.
same process would happen the following day. So that, in other words, the assumption this court is asked to make is that Mokgano and Mabena took over the duties of the persons who were in charge of the strict order which had to obtain at the cells.
Yes.
Because according to accused number 2's evidence, when I went over it, they did nothing, the other guys there. It's Mokgano who was
Yes.
busy, locking them in, locking them out.
Yes, but
And obviously, by implication also, what was recorded there must have come from Mokgano.
yes, but
That's how I read it.
yes, and I don't think that version was ever put to Sergeant Mokgani
No, it was never put, but I'm saying,
for him to comment.
yeah,
Yes. But you
because
know,
it just struck me that when Colonel Sonepul was testifying about the directives which they have to traverse when cell visits are made, if there are incidents, the recording of those incidents, etc., etc., if there are problems, the laying of charges, etc., etc., it would be very surprising, I mean, really, that Mokgano would accept the responsibility of running the cells. But more surprising would be the staff at the,
yes, the respective police stations.
yeah, to let Mokgano do whatever he wants. And if there are problems, who's responsible?
Yes, and I mean, how would you have obtained the keys, you know, to those cells? That version, my lord, we
Okay.
submit is improbable. But coming back to the occurrence books, as indicated, specifically as far as Exhibit NN is concerned, it was handed by,
NN, yeah?
yes, NN by agreement between the state and
Mr.
and-
Mgumezulu.
and Mr. Mgumezulu. Then, my lord, in paragraph 11.24, we deal with the presence of Mr. Mjiako. We respectfully submit that it has been abundantly demonstrated that accused number 2 held him out as his legal representative. He introduced him to Brigadier Gininda on the 23rd of May 2020 at Pretoria Moot Police Station. I'm sorry, June, my lord, 23 June, thank you, 23 June 2020.
24. 23 June.
Yes, 23,
Yeah, okay.
the day before the confession,
Oh, yeah.
at Pretoria Moot Police Station, and he handed him Exhibit YY, proving his enrollment with the LPC. He was present the next day when accused number 2 made a confession to Ms. Cronje, and accused number 2 confirmed that he is his legal representative to both Sergeant Mokgani and Mrs. Cronje. Hence, Ms. Cronje took down his details as well as the Fidelity Fund certificate number. He appeared for the accused in Phokeng and Boksburg Magistrate Court as per Exhibits RR and RR1. He also confirmed on record at the Boksburg Magistrate Court that he appears for the accused as per Exhibit EE in brackets 1, lines 20 to 24, and the accused did not refute that. Paragraph 11.25. It is submitted that the confession to Ms. Cronje, Exhibit JJ by accused number 2, in the presence of his lawyer, be admitted without further ado, as Mr. Mjiako would have raised any objection if there was anything untoward. Paragraph 11.6, we submit, my lord, that the version of the accused is riddled with contradictions, and it is so improbable that it ought to be rejected, and that the statements in question be ruled admissible. And this is almost, it's 24 after 3. It's almost
What's the time?
24 after 3. We have concluded the submissions. We just want to check if there's anything further, and we will then finalize our submissions tomorrow morning.
Okay, yeah. Then tomorrow, the interpreter will start by interpreting your hits for the gentlemen, and thereafter we may continue. Okay, sir.
As the court pleases.
I suggest you take them home
Yes,
so that you study them.
I'll have to cross night. Madoda noma ngingathi ngantolikela manje u50 page. Shukuthi mina nani kuzofanele ukuthi sisale kufikela ngo9 ntambama mhlawumbe. Manje ngizontolikela yona kusasa yonke into ekhulunywe umnumzana Bhanola.
Okay, the court will adjourn until tomorrow then.
Right.